Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
Today's upload is a continuation of the conversation about psychopathy that I was having with Jessica in the last episode. So if you missed that, you'll want to go back and catch it as well.
I think too, like the other like common misconception about psychopathy is that it's just not treatable. If you look back to treatment of people with addictions, treatment of people with who are sex offenders, you see this pattern of like, okay, well, now we've finally decided that this is a problem. Now we finally decided that there's treatment. Now this treatment's going to be super punitive. And then over time, you get people who go, I don't know if that's working,
Right.
And so like even things like, I think it's on the Psychopathy is website too. They talk about like, what are the kinds of treatments that don't work? Boot camps, scared straight. These are the kinds of things that do not gain traction with.
Well, and psychopaths don't learn from punishment.
No.
It doesn't matter how many times you do it. They'll learn from it. So
No.
actually, I was reading about the Mendota facilities success that they've had with their what they call their decompression model, which is actually, interestingly, pretty much the parenting strategy that her longtime therapist gave us when she was young, which is probably why things have remained quite kind of as stable as they have.
Sure.
So there are treatments, but we have it has been suggested, mostly not really. I don't think it's really because they think it's going to help therapeutically, but more as if we get back to where there's a safety threat, a way to remove her from the home because there aren't any options. The wilderness therapy. Do you know anything about the wilderness therapy programs?
I mean, it sounds like boot camp.
It's basically they sort of,
like
but
sending
it's less
them out
militarized. It looks like it's less militarized, but it's in the wilderness, and they hike all day long, and then they have short little group therapy sessions once a week or something. So I'm not sure exactly how much you can call that therapy at all, but
I don't know why ethically that would be more acceptable than, say, like juvenile detention. That would be my question.
I think that I think it's being recommended basically as for kids that you think need to go to juvenile detention, but you don't have access for that. Because if what we've been told, like I said, we've dealt with the police 4 times, I think, in the last year. And they've literally told us, because it is family members that she is doing these things to, we aren't going to do anything. It is your problem as the parent. This is your responsibility. Try not to die, but we will prosecute her if she does finally kill you.
Cool.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah. There's certain populations where you end up falling into these weird loopholes where it's like, this used to happen with guys that I had as clients who were intellectually disabled, and they'd be like, well, they're already here, and they already can't stand trial. So what are we going to do? And it's like, okay, but we also have to talk about some consistency and accountability. What I hear when you say like, maybe this is part of like your safety planning, when you talk about, we have these safety structures at kind of this like low level, but what happens if the behaviors go up to here? You're telling me you need more strict parameter type physical safety measures in place, and I can't offer that. I don't have guards. I don't have cameras. I'm not going to surveil you all the time or whatever, but maybe you're telling me this is what you need, and then that's where like the detention facilities like have their role. But like the wilderness stuff, like I think it's tricky, because I think, who is monitoring them?
It doesn't seem like they are very well monitored. I went down a rabbit. I spent 4 hours on TikTok the other day reading,
Okay.
watching videos and the hashtags. It was a little bit vague on, because they all call them abusive, but it was a little vague on what the actual specific abuses are. So I'm still unclear. So if anybody out there
Okay.
is watching this that can fill me in, please do. Other than the marching and a lot of the complaint from a lot of people was, yes, it's traumatic to be torn out of your home and
Yes.
feel like you're being discarded. So like I get
Yes.
that, but like the wilderness stuff she does anyway. She does the wilderness camping anyway. So like those skills, that's not going to be an issue for her. But therapeutically, it didn't seem like there was much in the way of therapy, and it doesn't seem like there's much oversight because they all seem to be like private companies.
That's what makes me concerned.
Right. And so that's
Yeah.
my concern, because I also, found some people, some graduates of these programs that really loved them and thought they were great. But my concern is, so I don't think, like I said, the wilderness experience for her wouldn't be that bad because she already does that stuff,
Right.
with scouts and stuff. But my concern is, because there's so little oversight, how do you know which program is okay and what's not? And because of the pathological lying that is just the reality of her condition, I have no way to assess when she does contact me if
this
things
is
are
a
going
legitimate
well or not.
Or if she complains of abuse, like what's her motivation for all that? I mean, that's the thing. Like, I would want some place that talks about, like, there are some empirically validated treatments like the PCIT, which I think is called like parent-child interaction therapy. And those
we tried that. That was she's just like, why are we here?
So there are therapies that are validated, and like every therapy is going to have like, and whatever gains traction with your particular child. Some of that, like, this is a little bit where we get into like the art of therapy, because one, it's finding a match, what's going to work with the particular client. Two, it's going to be about what is the clinician bringing to the table that is a good match for the client as well. Like what are the theoretical models that make me like super jazzed to be able to provide something and deliver it out. And with psychopathy, you have to have like lots of different skill sets, but you still need to have like guiding principles that are like leading your treatment. What I really liked working with was, it was called the old me, new me model. And so that's what I worked with sex offenders who had intellectual disabilities, many of whom had psychopathy. And what I like about it is that it's, so to kind of illustrate, back when I worked in Brooklyn, I was running groups with guys who had committed sex offense, and they would follow this kind of like, kind of a rubric every time we would meet, and they would say, "This is my name. This is what I did. I feel real bad." And then they would go on to the next person. And then that would repeat every single time we would do group. And I was like, after maybe the 14th time of this like repeating, I'm like, oh God, they think this is what I want to hear from them.
Oh, right.
They think that I want to hear, here is who I am. Here are my offenses. I feel really bad. Please move on.
Right.
And I was like,
right there.
Okay, so now what we're doing is every single day, where maybe it's taking responsibility. I don't know. But like you're saying, every single day, here is the absolute worst thing I've ever done. This is part of me now. And repeating it and having it reinforced in the setting. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I just really do not like this. So I had some just really like excellent supervision talking about learning the old me, new me model. And part of it was like starting to create some of that like dissonance between who it was that did those things and who it is that you're trying to be, with the idea that identity is extremely motivating, And so what we would come back to, especially like in carceral settings all the time, is even if you were super happy offending, even if you were super happy, like getting all the stimulation that you wanted, I cannot imagine that you enjoy these four walls so very, very much. Perhaps the methods you picked did not lead to what it is you wanted, you know? So if what it is that you want is not these four walls, let's look at these functional ways for you to, like, this is really like where we're radically focusing, but also not just being super like pragmatic. Like I'm talking about, let's unfuse you from this rigidity that's attached to the psychopathy, because that's what I notice as a clinician when I go and like when I met with clients like that, is that there's this like just inability to do something different. You know, we're going to be real rigid here. And so I want to like work with you to get that flexibility and see that growth, you know? So the way that I worked was to like really pull for identity, but there's another model that worked more for people who were, had like higher intellectual functioning, but honestly, like I had good effect with kind of both, was the Good Lives model. And the Good Lives model draws heavily from the old Me, New Me model as well. It's just more, it's got more domains kind of, you know, articulated. So with the Good Lives model, it's basically like, here are all the things that create your good life. You can make like a little plan. How were you getting those needs met when you were being dysfunctional and harmful? How can we get those values met in ways that do not break rules and allow you to do things like maintain freedom? You know, so I like to kind of wrap that up in the identity balloon, because I think it makes more sense when you think about it as a whole rather than just these individual things. That for me, that's easier to conceptualize. But those are things that like get people interested and engaged and motivated, because this is not supposed to be awful. You know,
Right.
like I do want to hear like the full accountability and the full responsibility. And I do want to see those behavioral changes with respect to like how you talk about the things that you did. You know, like I want to hear that. I want to hear that accountability. Even if you don't mean it, I want to hear it, because that's part of the boundary that I want to maintain as a clinician. You know, I want to hear the responsibility, because I also too know that there's the feedback with how you talk and how it influences your change internally. And I also know how you're going to be received out in the world. You know, there's going to be a lot of hands-off type approach.
Right. And that's what I talk with my daughter about lately, is she's, like I said, she's 15. She has decided, which this is interesting, like, because people try to rationalize other people's behaviors. We do a lot of projecting. So when a lot of people hear like, oh, she had, you know, attempted to take my life, well, she's angry with you, she must hate you. No, actually, interestingly, her motivation was she wants to, you know, which actually is interestingly kind of age appropriate for her age. She wants to be an adult and be out on her own and do what she wants.
Right. And you were in the way.
And I was the hurdle, because she's like, even if I run away, you know, you're going to look for me. Right. So if I'm not around to look for her, she can go do what she wants. Right. So now we have made a plan together for, okay, here is a way that you can move out at 16. She wants to go to a Job Corps program, right? So she can finish high school, get job training, get a job. And then if she can do all that before 18, she could potentially be legally emancipated and legally an adult, if that's,
Sure.
You know, if she's at a point where she is self-supporting. So, and that motivation is actually, I think, why things are calm right now, because she is working very hard on her schoolwork, and she's at 16, she's going, that's her thing. So I'm like, and there's a lot of people who are critical of that. What's the 16-year-old going to do? You know, I'm like, the reality is she's a very highly intelligent person.
Yes.
And she has made up her mind. She knows, and she has articulated that she understands, once you are 16, if you run away, the police don't often make you go home. They usually are just like, you know, and
Mhm.
she is aware of that. And
Mhm.
so if she has her mindset that she's leaving at 16, then I'm going to do everything that I can to help make that as productive as possible so she is set up in a
As
good
safe as
way.
possible.
That's where I'm trying to go, because if she
Yeah.
doesn't have the ability to take care of herself, support herself, or have a safe place to go,
Mhm.
the other alternatives, because the reality is she's probably going to go no matter what I say or try to do.
You have inadvertently and very intuitively approached the task. And like, I remember the first time we talked and I was like, God, no feedback. Like really what I would want for you is support for you personally more than like, I think you're guiding what you can and what is possible where you are, like as best you can. Like the only other thing that I would look at is maybe there might be some telehealth type resources, you know, but you also have to have buy-in. And some of that has to do, that's what I was talking about with respect to treatment. Like I never want to look at a person and say, you can't do this. You cannot, like, you can't get better, because I'm always surprised at the people who start off treatment really like gung ho and then drop. And then the people who are terrible or disengaged and then all of a sudden wake up and decide, I'm going to just do this homework and get it done, you know. And then you start to see that growth. Like as a clinician, as a parent, I think you have to be really, really addicted to the growth process. You have to be really tuned into the parts where you want to see those gains. And like I think like I had consulted with a friend with your permission about like talking about, you know, I was like, and I told her, I was like, here are the things that Summer has set up. And like, she's like, you know, I would maybe frame these things too as like, when you do these behaviors, to approach them without you know, without judgment, to the extent that you're capable of that, you know, that you're a human being. But like, you're showing me with this behavior that you need more security and I cannot provide more security, but you're showing me with this behavior that what you need is maybe going to be prison. Like, I don't like this for you. It's not what I want for you. It's probably not what you want for you, but this is what is happening, you know. And like approaching it from that distance where there's not the friction and the pull. It's not a power struggle that we're trying to engage in. We're trying to provide guidance, you know. Like, it's not, I'm not interested in controlling you or surveilling you for the rest of your life. I have things to do.
Right.
I want you to behave
And it's not
yourself out of
humanly
my
possible
supervision,
anyways.
you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And that is one thing that happened when in my deconstruction process from evangelicalism, was I somewhere along the way had a perspective shift on our job as parenting, where it's not we aren't molding these blanks, you know, they're not blank slates that we get to just fill in and here's the end product. That's not how it works. Kids are humans, and in the majority of their life, hopefully, it's going to be as an adult. So we're,
Right. We're stewards.
we can collaborate and build a relationship. And my job is to help you, not try to force you and control you. Empathy, it goes a long way.
Yeah. No, I mean, and these are also just like interpersonal, like, I think too about like, what does it take to like come to the table with somebody with psychopathy who has these incredible needs? Well, here you are, a person who's approaching it from like this, you have all like extra interpersonal skills that you're sort of facilitating this, like somebody who has a real lack of them, you know. So I'm gonna lend these parts of myself. Like, I think it was Winnicott who talked about lending ego support. It might have been Freud, I don't remember. But like, it's basically like, I'm giving this part of myself to you, this person who's still developing, you know, to allow you to kind of cross the bridge here, you know. And then I trust that you'll be able to do it on your own and at a certain point, you know. But anyway,
At this point, she has reached the conclusion
Mm-hmm.
that she understands that her callous and unemotional traits
Mm-hmm.
are not typical, right? Which, of
Mm-hmm.
course, there was a whole, therapy arc in there,
Sure.
teaching her to understand them and all of that. But she understands that her unemotional traits are not typical, and it's her superpower to her, really. Like she actually has expressed to me that our empathy and our emotions limit us, and that so anyway, where I'm going with this, which I kind of get, like logically that would make sense. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have empathy and you don't have that emotional pull, like I get what she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we are just lesser humans with with our emotions.
Oh yeah. Poor little
Well,
beings.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Uh-huh.
what I wonder is how much, and I know there's no way to know this really, but
Mm-hmm.
how much of that is just because there's a certain amount of that age appropriately anyway, right?
Yes.
That type of thinking. And so
Yes.
I'm wondering how much of that she might grow out of as her brain finishes developing, and she has more exercise in relationships blowing up because of that approach
Mm-hmm.
to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that maybe there'll be some motivation to kind of reevaluate that as she gets older. I'm hoping. I don't know. There's no way to know, I don't think, but
One approach that I've taken before
Mhm.
was, be the scientist. Be the scientist. You tell me, is this getting the things you want? Tell me all the things that you want. Let's
Mhm.
label all that stuff out. Is this instrumentally getting you the things that you want? Like vis-a-vis, kind of in the frame of like the Good Lives model, right? Here are the things that are super important to you. Is your approach better? Is it going to get you more? Try a different one. See if it gets you more of the good stuff that you're looking for and report back. Like, try it. How are you going to know? Like, so be your own little scientist and report it back. Like, ideally too, like a lot of those kinds of discussions would be held with multiple people in her circle, her therapist, a teacher, several teachers, aunties, uncles, whoever you can get that helps the support, because you need it too. It cannot just be you, it cannot just be you. So that would be like, that's one, particular approach. But I think too, like the best clinicians that I know are really some of the best parents I know too. And they have like really, really flexible approaches to their children's needs. And I think that that is just kind of universal with good parenting, is like recognizing, being flexible in your approach and your different ways of like looking and centering the person you're trying to relate to. Are you on? Oh, there you are.
Oh, wait. We're freezing. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're back.
Okay. No, I think it's hard to say like how much is something that she'll grow out of. I don't know. I never, I just never want to get in the way of somebody's growth. People can be really surprising in this regard.
I mean, I'm hoping that
Yeah.
some of it, as she sees, I mean, we have been, I stopped like asking questions from her a long time ago. Like my communication style has changed dramatically from our
I bet.
relationship. I don't ask questions. I don't ask, why did you do that? Odds are she didn't even know why she did it. Or if she did, she's not going to tell me anyway. Because
Right.
you can watch her do something and she didn't do it and she doesn't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So I've just been like very matter of factly. I try not to, I guess fortunately, due to my own trauma, I have an amazing ability to compartmentalize emotions. So, we just very matter of factly deal with things. Okay. Like she got money for her birthday and Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
I simply took it. This is going to go towards the window screen that you destroyed last week. I have to, and that was it. There wasn't a big, they didn't have to escalate emotionally. And there is ongoing dialogue about, things like, oh, okay, why can't I go there? Well, when you treat people in an abusive way, they often don't allow you to come in their space anymore. So moving forward, perhaps we should treat people in a little different way, and
even that conversation is respectful, right? Because what you're saying is like, I'm going to tell you the facts of why somebody doesn't want you in their space. Here are these things. I'm not going to be afraid to tell you why. I'm going to explain that. I'm not going to belabor it. Here it is once, you can't do these things and then still continue to XYZ LMNOP,
Right. And that's just been what we don't argue about it. We're not going to argue about it. This is just it. And she kind of, she accepts that. She's like, okay, so hopefully the seeds will grow. And as she gets older, like I did mention the other day, I've noticed her actively practicing emotional mimicry, which is kind of fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
Because I've watched her like repeat phrases that she's heard other people say and try to. And like I said, somebody called me out saying I was saying something negative about her. I don't really think it's necessarily negative because she needs those skills to have long-term relationships. Yes, it can be used for malicious intent to manipulate people, but not always. And she does need to understand those things. But it is fascinating.
Well, who's to say she's not approaching this like building emotionality task just later? Like, I mean, I would have a very open mind about that too, so. I
mean, it is what it is. I mean, I don't think it's inherently wrong.
No.
But, yeah, it's interesting. It's what was that you said, that about the lion?
So I had asked like in the beginning, are there specific questions that people have that I can like, because I like to like come correct and prepared. And you were like, people have asked what it is like living with a psychopath. And I have just said, it's very interesting. And I was like, oh, you mean it's like living with a lion in your house. So this lion hasn't like unalived you yet, but it could at any time. And you're just kind of aware of that. And I was really struck by some of the things that you wrote when you talked about like where are the protections for parents who are looking for safety resources. I know like back in New York, there were parents who, remanded their children to like psychiatric care and stuff like that, or like surrendered parental rights. Those are, I guess, some of the legal mechanisms that people have used in the past, but more often than not, it's going to be the experience that you have with the police where you're told unless she actually does these things to you, nothing is really going to happen. So then the onus is on you of like creating the safe environment, maximally speaking.
And where we're at, those mechanisms aren't even really on the table. You can only psychiatric care is only available if you can private pay. So only if you're wealthy.
Cool.
Other than, like I said, they'll take her for the acute time until they say she's not a threat to herself anymore. Now she's your problem. It doesn't matter that she's a threat to you.
Right. Homicidality. We care about suicidality, but only kind of. And and only for certain people, and only if you have money, and only in certain parts of the state, and only,
Right. And here in Oklahoma, you can't surrender your parental rights unless there is someone willing to take them, like say adoption, or if you want to, because it's also often suggested to parents to sign their kids over, quote unquote, to child welfare, because they do have access to more care and more facilities. So theoretically, they are better equipped to be able to get them the care that they need. However, in order to do that, you have to open an investigation saying you are abandoning your child, which also
Right.
puts custody of any other children you have at
Into
risk.
question.
Yes. And also there are certain jobs that you cannot have if you are,
A
have an
person who has
abandonment.
surrendered rights.
Yes. So it's not really open to most people as an option. And then, like I said, people are, so then all people get desperate. And so then you get the suggestions of like the wilderness therapy or what have you, which again is extremely expensive. The amount that they charge is insane. I looked at that the other day. It's like it is definitely a profitable industry.
Oklahoma has done a very good job at restricting access to mental health care at really almost every level.
Absolutely.
And I have such admiration for people who continue to do things like work, live, and teach in Oklahoma. I couldn't stick it out, So I couldn't. And I was there, like, I realized very quickly coming to Oklahoma that the cost of childcare would be greater than any possible job I could ever have as a therapist. Or it wouldn't meet the safety requirements that I had for myself and my children, So, that's where, like, you have a person like me who's decently motivated to do good work in the community and it has barriers to even be able to provide treatment.
Right.
I'm not saying I need to work for like, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it would be nice to not like go into debt over childcare.
Right.
So, and I don't think that's changed in
No, it hasn't changed.
If anything, it's gotten worse.
Yes.
There are multiple barriers on the clinician side for being able to provide like decent treatment. And two, like working with people with psychopathy, most often the place that you're going to do that work would be like in prison and jail populations. If I had had like a PsyD or my PhD and a licensure at that level, I'm sure I could have gotten hired. They do tend to pay a little bit better. All that's true. But the prison systems are not, they can be safe. I have worked in safe places. I don't know. I mean, Oklahoma's women's correctional was like referenced in Orange is the New Black in the book.
Oh, really?
Yes. Like they talk about some of the human rights violations that are occurring in, and there are tons of local activists in Oklahoma talking about what occurs at the jails. They're representative of what is occurring, and they're not safe places to be. And they're certainly not safe places to be with COVID-19. Right. But like, if we can't at least have like basic safety, this is what I'm saying. Like basic safety allows us to have these therapeutic relationships. If we don't have that, I can't do my job, right. And the same is true for you as a parent. Like you have, very judiciously like created these safety structures, for yourself and for your child and for your other family members. Like everybody benefits from this, but you had to kind of ingeniously create it for yourself,
And I have to, and it's a very interesting line to walk, because I can literally only do this because I live out in the woods in a rural area that nobody cares about. Right. Because I couldn't set her up her own cabin if I lived in the suburbs still. That wouldn't be allowed.
I wouldn't think so.
Right. It's just not something you can do. It just wouldn't be possible. So for the majority of people, those are not options, and there isn't support. And apparently this is a problem across the world. I mean, in that parenting group I'm in, there are parents across the globe, and no country seems to have a good system set up to provide the therapeutic interventions or the safety planning for these families. Everybody's just kind of left hanging on their own.
Right. Like the issue too is like with psychopathy, when you have like when you have them in like the carceral setting in prison, they're like we have said, they're captive audience, right? But like when they're out in there have been programs that have attempted to reach people at the community level, which is smart. Like that is a good approach. The trouble is, like with psychopathy, if you're active in the community, you're probably not going to want to self-identify as psychopathic. And if you're not caught up in prison, what is your motivation for ever receiving treatment? You figured out how to fly under the radar. There's a brilliant book it's also by Hare. It's called Snakes in Suits. And it talks about basically like the white collar crime aspect of psychopathy, because there are certainly plenty of psychopaths in almost every profession. Like, you know, they're in medicine, they're in the stock exchange, they're politicians, you know, they're kind of everywhere. Like they're going to be evenly distributed across the population, just like everything else is. It's just that it's a smaller percentage, you know. So.
And the finding people in the community setting you mentioned, that was one thing Dr. Keel talks about when he was focusing on juvenile psychopathy in the community. And one of the big hurdles that he had was a lot of parents are hesitant to be honest about what they're dealing with their child for
100%.
whatever reason, because, you know, we are concerned about them ending up in the in the carceral system, because the younger that happens, the more, you know, that kind of sets the
recidivism
in the pipeline.
All of it.
Right. And then we're also often told that this is our fault. And so there's a resistance to, and there's an attempt to downplay it. I was actually reading a post by a parent yesterday about how they admitted that they lied and hid some behaviors of their child when the police got involved, because they didn't want their child going to residential treatment.
100%.
Yeah.
Families do it all the time with a variety, like family dynamics are interesting in that way, but like where parents will try to downplay whatever because they're trying to help their child avoid consequences and some of the stuff is really legitimate, like, you know, not wanting your kid to have interactions with law enforcement at age 7, like, yeah, I get it. I don't want my kid to have a law enforcement,
which is how I ended up pulling her out of school, because that's where we were at. We were at an age where they're like, we're going to start calling the police on her when she behaves in this way. And I'm like, well, I don't want her, you know, going to jail at 10. So, so
what parent wants that?
We had to eliminate that, eliminate that possibility. So we did at least get to delay any police interactions until she was 14. But, and that was one thing, her therapist, she was with the same therapist from time she was 5 until she was 14. And that was one thing the therapist did make a point to talk to me about, was with the pattern we're looking at some point, there is probably going to be some sort of police interaction or residential treatment. Let her go to residential, because it is better than the alternative of them treating it as strictly a criminal matter. And
that's
like,
very
I know
pragmatic.
you're not going to want to. Yeah. She said, I know you're not going to want to, because you want to protect her and you want to help her, but let her go, because.
No, I mean, I think that's extremely pragmatic and, you know, future oriented advice. One of the things that I like when I think about like what is kind of next for people with psychopathy is probably just like,
sorry about that. I had a call coming in. Can you repeat whatever you just said?
Yeah, no worries. Just that, like, I think one of the ways that allows people to like create more like ever evolving safety plans and ways to like get better that are sort of inventive and go around the barriers that already exist for treatment are the different ways of connecting online. So like, I really love that there are, I don't watch it because I'm an old person, but like TikTok, like I'm not, I know there's a community of people who self-identify with psychopathy and talk about it and try to educate and destigmatize. And I think that work is really important. I think all of those different ways to connect all have potential, and so they can be like really creative resources to be able to talk with another parent to say, hey, what did you do that worked? Here's my circumstance. Do you have feedback? Like, those are all, using each other as resources helps us keeping from getting burnt out, because that is a huge, huge risk factor in working with people with psychopathy, is just being totally financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically depleted, So you've got to have you have to have, as the parent, caregiver, provider, like disciplined self-care. And that disciplined self-care involves what your good lives plan looks like. So reward in your career, reward in your environment, connection with, if you have a religion, connection with that, if you have the spiritual practice or whatever it is, like all of those little domains. And I can send you a picture of like the Good Lives model, because I just really like it.
That would be awesome if you would.
I'm kind of visual sometimes, like with graphics, and so I can like see it better in my head. But like your plan for yourself, and I'm a caregiver as well, so I say this as a person who tries very diligently to practice this for myself too. Our plans for ourselves as caregivers is just as essential as the plans we have for our children, because, it's very obvious, like without us, they have less and less capacity to be able to get better and to do more and to reach adulthood in the ways that we want them to. But when you're dealing with somebody who has special needs of any kind, whether that's a personality disorder, a psychiatric disorder, maybe you have an intergenerational family, whatever that caregiving situation looks like for you, those are going to be things that take away more, and they chip and they take away more, and then you have less to offer. So we have to have, like, part of our safety planning is taking care of ourselves, and it sucks. And it's hard. Like, it's really, really hard.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.